In May, Snohomish County prosecutors charged 5 people in the fentanyl overdose death of a 13-month-old girl named Willow. Detectives say during their search of the home, they found pills, paraphernalia, and video of some of the suspects smoking drugs right in front of the toddler and other kids. However, despite that evidence, prosecutors could only charge them with a misdemeanor for reckless endangerment. That's because it's not clear which adult left the fentanyl laying around, and state law does not support fentanyl as endangerment with a controlled substance. It only specifies meth. You can imagine how I reacted when I heard about that. My head popped off. And then the King County Prosecutor's Office told me this about this case. Take a listen.
Yeah, we had a situation where there was a kid who didn't die, but was with her father or father figure when he was selling drugs, allegedly right off a Yesler, and overdosed. And what police were very concerned of was that child dying. And the hard part is if that child had died, we could have charged that as a felony. But because the child didn't die, it's a misdemeanor. And that seems out of whack. And what King County prosecutors under Lisa Manning have said is that just doesn't seem to make sense. Olympia and prosecutors statewide can do better than that. And that's not to try to make the nuclear family worse. It's try to protect kids from dying.
So I reached out to ask Representative Lauren Davis, a Democrat from the 32nd Legislative District, to ask why isn't the legislature changing the child endangerment statute to include fentanyl? And she joins us now. Now, right off the bat, I will say I have a lot of respect for you because you support judicial accountability, holding judges accountable. So I was really surprised when we started emailing back and forth about your take on this. Why do you not support naming fentanyl as a drug in child endangerment?
So primarily because I don't support the prosecution of addiction, the disease of substance use disorder itself. So I used to work in suicide prevention for a living, and when we were crafting legislation related to the safe storage of firearms, we had an exemption where we would not prosecute parents if their own child died by suicide because of lack of safe storage, and we don't prosecute in the state of Washington in those cases. And the reason is there's no greater punishment you could ever heap on a parent than the loss of their own child, regardless of if that parent does or does not have substance use disorder. So in those cases, I don't support further punishment through prosecution. I do support child welfare interventions. Now, in the case where it's somebody else's child, I mean, I think that is a bit of a different conversation. It's typically their own child.
Yeah. Well, in Willow's case, it is complicated because there were 5 adults, including one of her parents, her mother, and then a bunch of family members. But let me put this to you. If I have a gun, and I leave my gun in a child's room, which a man did in Pierce County in 2022, and my child uses that to shoot and kill another child, I'm going to get charged with manslaughter. So why, if I leave fentanyl pills laying around the ground and the kid takes them and they die, why aren't they charged with manslaughter? Why a misdemeanor?
So again, they can be charged with manslaughter if there's a fatality. I think the issue, the gap in the law has to do with the non-fatal cases. But again, I would go back to my suicide analogy. So there was a part of the reason we passed the safe storage legislation related to firearms is we had a case out of Bremerton where there was a child who brought a firearm in a backpack, set the backpack on a table, it shot a young girl in the face in Bremerton, and they couldn't appropriately prosecute. Now they can under state law, but had that same child or an older child died by suicide with the same firearm, I don't morally support the prosecution of that parent whose child died. And was it the parent's fault because they left the fentanyl or because they left the firearm? Yes, but I just don't see that is not my sense of justice. But again, if it's somebody else's child, which it usually is not, I mean, I think there's a potential argument there.
When we talk about fentanyl, though, those who are addicted to fentanyl, I mean, it's not like other drugs where you can go in on a 30-day program. I mean, this takes 3 months alone just to get physically out of your system. And this is getting worse. 385 people have already died this month in King County. We're on track to top last year's numbers, which were down from the year before. We were starting to make progress. We're slipping back the other way. As much work is being done, but you don't think it sends the wrong message to charge these adults with misdemeanors? You really think they should only be charged with that because they have a sickness?
So if you look at sort of the message and what actually deters criminal conduct, it actually has almost nothing to do with the severity of punishment. Whether something is a gross misdemeanor or a felony has basically no bearing on people committing that offense. What matters is the swiftness with which a person will get caught and the certainty that they'll get caught. And so measures to increase swiftness and certainty of punishment, I readily support. I'm generally hesitant to increase criminal penalties, although it depends on the case, because there's no evidence to suggest that that will deter criminal conduct.
Okay, fair enough. And it did take a year for them to even charge and arrest in Willow's case. Let's talk about something else we might see eye to eye on, removing kids from parents in drug-addicted homes where CPS has been involved. We had Travis Couture, a Republican, on a few days ago talking about this, but I've also heard on the flip side, people say if you take my kids away and you put them in foster care, they're in danger there. Where do you come down on removing kids from drug-addicted parents?
So the legislature tried to fix that issue. In 2024, we passed Senate Bill 6109, trying to increase removals in cases where fentanyl is present. And the data is getting worse. There are more fatalities and near fatalities. So to me, that suggests that we didn't go far enough, and that we probably do need to ease the standard, perhaps closer to what it used to be prior to the passage of the Keeping Families Together Act, at least as it relates to what the legislation calls high-potency synthetic opioids or fentanyl. And again, I support a child welfare intervention. I support measures to promote child safety and ensure that child is not harmed, and provide that parent with wraparound support and treatment and hope that they can and will recover.
Do you think more of your fellow Democrats might come across and start supporting this issue a little more as we move forward? Because this is not going away. It's not going anywhere.
I hope so. It's a complicated conversation. You mentioned there's pushback on the foster care system, too, for very valid reasons. So there's not really a easy answer. We are trying to promote relative placement, which is sort of an in-between, right? So where you're not having to deal with the foster care system entirely. But I hope that we can do more than what we did in 2024, because it was inadequate, and I'll speak for myself. As a lawmaker, feel culpable in these deaths. We didn't do enough.
Yeah, you take every death of these kids personally, I think. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your opinion. I absolutely appreciate it. Representative Lauren Davis, thank you very much. Legislature reconvenes in 7 months. Let's hope we don't have, unfortunately, more dead kids to talk about before then. Hannah?